Good afternoon. We are now in these challenging times where we are quarantined, isolated, however way you want to put it. I thought we'll take this opportunity at least to review the order, the evening of Pesach, the Seder. Seder literally means the order of the events, the order of the evening. Before I begin, I just want to make an interesting note that actually the very first Seder, the very first Pesach, the original Seder, when the Jews were still in Egypt, the night before they left, that very first Seder had an element of quarantining. Hashem said they had extended family groups with their Seder, but they could not leave their house the entire evening. Va'atem loy seitzu ish mipasach Pesach ad beker. No one was allowed to leave because there was a plague. Hashem said, and that's actually where the name Passover comes. Pesach, Passover, where it comes from is Hashem said, you stay home, you're not allowed to leave the entire evening, this is your quarters. And Hashem says, Va'avarti, and I will pass over, Fasachti, I will go and I will strike the Egyptian firstborn. Fasach Hashem, Abatei B'nai Yisrael, Hashem passed over the Jewish homes. But so there was an element of quarantining. They were home and they couldn't leave the entire evening. What happened next was the redemption. May it be for us too as well, speedily in our days. May the redemption happen very soon after our quarantining. May it come very speedily. This Pesach may we celebrate already in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. So we go back to the original, very original Pesach, where the Yidden were quarantined for the Seder. Another note I want to point out, although we are quarantined and we're not with extended family, we may be just with a spouse or alone, I want to make a strong suggestion that still let's not do the Seder dressed down. Let's not do the Seder in PJs or in sweatpants. We should dress up in honor of Yom Tov. It's Chag. It's a holiday in honor of Hashem, in honor of Yom Tov, in honor of our parents, our children. We should be dressed up in honor of the Chag. Just to point out, our ancestors in the concentration camp would do anything for just a morsel of matzah, a morsel of matzah. So we have, Baruch Hashem, we're home. We have matzah, we have wine, we have what to celebrate and to be thankful for. It is challenging times, but we still have what to be thankful for. And as such, I'd like to strongly suggest to dress up in honor of the Yom Tov. It'll add to the atmosphere, add to the spiritual energy that the Seder is supposed to bring about. Let's move along to the Seder. The Seder is comprised of biblical mitzvot, rabbinical mitzvot, and ritual and custom, and generally there's 15 steps to the Seder, 14 steps that we have to do, and the 15th Hashem, if we do the 14 steps properly, the 15th step Hashem accepts our Seder favorably, nirtza. So we call it the 15 steps, or the 15 steps to freedom, but there's an order. Like I said, you have to drink wine, you have to eat matzah, you have to eat karpas and charesis, and there's so much to do. Where do you begin? Where do you start? And where do you end? And that's literally what the term Seder means. There's an order of events, how it should take place. I'll demonstrate just to point out again that there's an important mitzvah to actually have the wine and the matzah. We'll go through that a little bit later, but have the wine and the matzah, at least the wine and matzah, after nightfall. It says Achos Abasar Balayla Hazeh. Balayla means actual night. So although many other Yom Tevim and other regular Shabbos, you might be able to take Shabbos in a little early and make Kiddush before nightfall. In this case, Pesach, Kiddush, the 4 cups, and the matzah, at least that should be done after nightfall. Preferably the entire Seder should be done after nightfall. You could nap during the day, and nightfall in Halifax this year is 8:22. I'm going to demonstrate the Seder. So where do you begin? So like I said, there's biblical mitzvah, there's rabbinical mitzvah, and there's ritual. So the first thing is we have, in order to create the evening, the order of the events, the order of the evening, you need matzah, you need wine, and you need the Seder plate, which is comprised of the 6 items, which we'll go through. So you have the matzah, the wine, and the 6 items. So you begin, now matzah, first of all, you have a matzah cover, just like every Shabbos and every Yom Tov, you have 2 loaves of bread covered before you make Kiddush. You have a matzah cover, where the matzah is covered during Kiddush. It's nothing to do with gebrux or anything like that. It's simply covering the matzah for Kiddush. In our case, in addition to the 2 loaves that you have to have during every Shabbos and every Yom Tov, you have a 3rd loaf. You have 3 matzot, which I'll explain shortly. So you have the 3 matzahs. Again, the 3 matzahs have a certain system, a certain order, which takes place during the unfolding of the evening. So the 3 matzahs correspond generally. Besides the fact that you need 2 full matzahs for Lacha Mishnah, for like every Shabbos, you have 2 loaves, 2 complete loaves when you make a maitzi. So you have the 2 matzahs, you have a 3rd matzah as well. You have the afikoma and you have the yachatz we'll speak about. So the 3 matzahs generally correspond to the Kohen, the Levi, and the Yisro, and it's an acronym, Keli. It creates a vessel for Hashem's energy to flow through this vessel that we prepare. So I'll demonstrate. You take the 3 matzot, you start with the very bottom matzah, and you put a cloth between each matzah. It doesn't have to be a fancy cloth of any sort, but you put on the very bottom, you start off, you put the very bottom is the Yisrael, then there's a cloth. On top of the Yisrael, Olav is the Levi. And on top of the Levi, we have the Kohen, again, which is an acronym of Kli, or it's an acronym for Yelech, means to go forward and rise in your spiritual heights. So we have the 3 matzot. That is the first thing you need. You start the Seder with the 3 matzot. Now you have the Seder plate. Some people have the Seder plate separately. Some people have it on top of the matzah. So again, I wanted to mention also earlier that certain things are biblical and rabbinical, that's universal, and certain things vary. There's certain customs that vary from community to community, from family to family. And if your family, your community, you're used to certain things that are different, obviously you follow your custom, your tradition. I'm just going to demonstrate generally the Chabad custom. A lot of it is similar and the same across the board, and some things vary. So we have the matzah, and our Seder plate is actually just the items, the 6 items that sit right on top of the matzah cover, right on top. We don't have a specific plate necessarily that we insert the items. Many people do, and either however you do it is fine. So you have the 6 items. Now the 6 items start as follows. You have 2 cooked items. I'll explain more in detail shortly, but you have 2 cooked items that represent the 2 offerings that were brought in the Holy Temple. When the Holy Temple stood, there was every holiday, we had a carbon chagiga, a festive offering. And in addition to that, on Pesach, we had a Pesach offering, a Paschal lamb, Pesach offering. So you have 2 cooked items that we put on the Seder table, on the Seder plate, that commemorate these 2 karbonis, these 2 sacrifices, the carbon Pesach and the carbon Chagiga. I'll explain more in detail shortly, but you have a neck bone is used for the Zraya. That commemorates the Paschal offering, the Pesach offering. Now, just to explain the term Zraya. So in the pasuk, in the verse in the Torah, it says that God will take us out of Egypt, biyad chazaka, with a strong hand, uvizraya nituya, an outstretched arm. So zraya means literally an arm. We don't use an arm. We use a bone, a neck bone, or a leg but the Zraya, the term Zraya is from the word Hashem will take us out of Egypt with an outstretched arm. We use Chabad customers to use a roasted neck bone from a chicken, but we don't. This stays on the Seder plate all evening. It's not used. It's there to commemorate the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, and we actually roast it because the Korban Pesach was roasted. We roast it, but we don't eat it, and you're not supposed to eat it. We actually take off. We remove most of the meat that you shouldn't, by mistake, eat it. It shouldn't seem like you're eating the Pesach offering. You're substituting this for the Pesach offering. So it's just to commemorate the Pesach offering that was brought in the Holy Temple on the eve of Pesach. Then we use another cooked item. In this case, it's an egg, Zreya, Beitza. We put on the top right is the Zreya, top left is the way we do it. Again, it could be anywhere on your Seder plate, according to your custom. Kabbalistically, this follows Kabbalah. It's this particular order. On the top right is the Zreya, the top left is the Beitza, the cooked item. The reason for the Korban Chagiga, this commemorates the festive offering that was brought on every holiday in the Beis Hamikdash. The reason we use an egg, we use a cooked egg, which is still in its shell, and the reason an egg is circular and it represents the life cycle event. And mourners, in a sense, we're mourning the fact that we do not have the Beis Hamikdash, or built Beis Hamikdash, where we can bring the Korban Chagiga. And just like mourners eat after they come home, after the funeral, they come home, they eat egg. The first meal of theirs is a velos, is an egg. So we too have the egg, which commemorates also the mourning, the fact that we're mourning that we don't have the Holy Temple built. May it be speedily in our days rebuilt, and we'll be able to bring both karbanos soon in the Beis Hamikdash. So you have the Zreya and the Beitza, then you have the egg, the neck bone and the egg, or any bone you use, a shank bone, it's fine. So these two are the top two items. Everything else, like I said, will be used throughout the evening, except for the Zreya remains on the Seder plate all evening. Then we have on the Seder plate, we have the maror. Now for maror, the Mishnah, the Talmud and the Mishnah enumerate several items that can be used for maror. Some of them we don't know exactly what the Mishnah was referring to. We know for sure that the Mishnah was referring to romaine lettuce and horseradishes, which we actually use romaine lettuce and freshly ground horseradish, and we placed it on the Seder table right underneath between the Zreya and the Beitza beneath it. Now, the reason why romaine lettuce can be used, the last time I had a Caesar salad, it was not bitter. And as such, the question is, why should romaine lettuce be sufficient to fulfill the obligation of maror? And it's explained that's just as when the Jewish people went into Egypt, they went in as brothers of the viceroy of Joseph, the brothers of the viceroy of Egypt. They came down in a sweet way, in a good way, in a pleasant way. Later on, they ended up as slaves. Long enough, it does have bitterness in it, and therefore the halacha is that you can fulfill the obligation with romaine lettuce. Use ground horseradish as well. There's a certain minimum amount that you have to eat by 10 pieces of romaine lettuce. Should be eaten within 4 minutes. Take a couple of pieces together, you'll know for sure that you had the minimum amount to fulfill the obligation of maror. Then we have the charoset, which I'll explain. Goes right here on the right-hand side, underneath the zra, between the maror and between. The charoset is actually a mixture of, again, the different recipes and different customs and different communities. Our custom is to take apples, pears, walnuts, and grind it to make a little pudding out of it, so to speak. It's supposed to represent the mortar that the Jewish people were slaves and they had to make mortar and use it for the bricks to build the pyramids in Egypt. and you dip the maror in the charoses. Charoses, what's the name charoses? Where did the name charoses come from? So charoses, Talmudic, the Talmud is explained it's pottery, earthenware, and that again resembles the fact that the clay that the Jewish people needed to use in Egypt when they were slaves, building the pyramids and the cities in Egypt. For karpas, on the bottom left over here, karpas, again, karpas, what does the word karpas mean? Karpas means of a vegetable, but there were some sages that dug a little deeper and wanted to find out because yerek would be a vegetable. Karpas is not a common term for vegetable. So they dug, and in a certain language, karpas used to be referred to as celery. People use celery, people use parsnip, and some people use other parsley, celery, parsley, or parsnip. Chabad custom is to use a shallot, a piece of onion, actually a little onion, or cooked potatoes. Those are the two that Chabad use. But again, the celery, parsnip, I've seen, and parsley. And finally, we have the sixth item, is again a second maror, which will be explained later on. It's the maror that's used in the sandwich. So again, you have the similar to the original maror. You have again underneath here, you have a chazeres. This is the Seder plate. And I'll explain again, certain things have a minimum amount that you have to eat. Certain things you just eat a little bit of it. And as the evening progresses, certain things come off the Seder plate as they're used, with the exception of the zroa, as I mentioned earlier. So we begin. The first step of the evening is like every Shabbos and every Yom Tov. You begin the evening with the recitation of Kiddush. The difference is, in our case, a couple of differences. First of all, a normal Kiddush, one person can make Kiddush and everyone gets a little bit from the original Kiddush, and that's fine. In our case, everyone, since it's the first of the 4 cups, it's extremely important that everyone have their own cup of wine. It should be filled, and the Talmud even says it, if it pours over, it's a sign of blessing. So we fill the cup, the Kiddush cup, to the rim. You don't need a large cup. 3.2 ounces is fully fine. You can have wine or grape juice. Again, each cup should be at minimum of 3.2 ounces of wine or grape juice, and you should drink preferably the full cup, and at least the majority of the 3.2 ounces. And again, another very, very important point is that it should be, and it's really important to drink it while we recline. I'm not gonna go through the entire Haggadah, the recitation of the entire Haggadah, but I will recite the Kiddush just to demonstrate the Kiddush, and drink the first glass of wine, and the rest just explain. Savri Meranon, Barchata Dinoi, Elaine Malachailam, Beirei Pri Hagafen, Barchata Hashem, Alekeinu Malachailam, Asher Barchabanu Mikolam, Benimanu Mikolash, Mikichanu Bemitzvesov, Atitam Lanu, Hashem Alekeinu Bi'ahava, Me'edav u'simcha, chag mizman l'sosei, es yem, chag hamatzis hazeh, es yem tev, mikra kodesh hazeh, zman cheluseinu mikra kodesh, hazeh yichel yetzias Mitzrayim, kivanu b'charta v'isonu kidashtu mikol ha'amim, u'me'yadei kodesh v'simcha v'sosei ninchaltanu, baruch atah Hashem, v'kadosh Yisrael v'hazmanim, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu al chaylam, shehechiyanu, v'kimanu, v'kiyanu, lizman hazeh. So again, just to point out that it's very important to recline when drinking the 4 cups. Some authorities are of the opinion that if you don't recline, you have to drink the cups again. That's how important it is. The second cups, most importantly, certainly should be drunk. Drunk while reclining. Another point to point out is the entire evening is comprised of 2 aspects. Some things commemorate our bondage, our hard labor, our back-breaking labor in Egypt, the Mara, the Haresas, and certain parts of the Haggadah represent our bondage, our slavery, our difficulty, and certain things of the Haggadah, of the evening of the Seder, represent our liberation, our freedom. So you have a combination of these 2 items, these 2 aspects of the evening. Obviously, reclining, that's how noblemen and royalty eat and drink. Reclining to the left, it's very important to recline to the left for several reasons, but simply from a practical sense, a person's windpipe is on the right-hand side. If you recline to the right, the food may go down the wrong pipe. It may be dangerous. So we recline to the left, have an armchair, have a pillow, have a chair next to you, which you actually recline when you're supposed to recline several times through the evening. Another important point that I wanted to mention a little earlier, I'll mention it now. The Haggadah, which again comes from the biblical mitzvah of recitation of the evening, reciting the Haggadah, telling the story. So the entire Haggadah, the entire evening, the Haggadah is separated, is divided into 4 sections. It can be divided in 4 sections corresponding to the 4 cups, as I'll explain. Section number 1 is Kiddush. You fill the Kiddush cup and you recite Kiddush over the first glass of wine. Then later on, as we'll get to it, you fill the second cup and you recite Magid. You recite the Haggadah over the second cup. So you don't drink the second cup when it's filled. You fill it before the recitation, before the 4 questions. You recite the Haggadah, which is a biblical mitzvah, to recite certain portions, at least the minimum amount that we'll discuss. You have to recite the Haggadah. The recitation of the Haggadah is done over glass number 2. So you have Kiddush, you have the Haggadah, you have Magid, the recitation of the Haggadah. That's cup number 2, section number 2. Then you fill the cup before you bench, after you finish the meal, after the Afikoman. You fill the 3rd cup, and you recite the benching, the grace after meals, over the 3rd cup. So you fill it before you bench, and benching is recited over the 3rd cup of wine. After benching, you fill the 4th cup and you recite Hallel over the 4th cup of wine. So you have Kiddush, it's simple. You have Kiddush, you have Magid, the recitation of the Haggadah, you have benching, and you have Hallel. Hallel is really to thank Hashem, to praise Hashem for the miracles. And so it's a simple way to remember how to divide the 4 cups, when to drink the 4 cups. If you drink 4 cups, you fill 4 cups and just drink 4 cups. No, you have to separate at least a minimum of time between each cup. But in this way, it makes so much sense, and it's clarifies, it crystallizes how the system works. The Haggadah is divided into four: Kiddush, Magid, benching, and Halal. So we said Kiddush, we had the first cup of wine. Normally, you're having our meal now. Normally, Yom Tov, you have your meal. But tonight is Pesach, so there's several things that have to be done before the meal. So now, the next thing we want to do is eat the vegetable, and take the vegetable and dip it in salt water. But in order to take eat the vegetable, the karpas, in order to eat the vegetable, there is a halacha. There's a law, in Jewish law. It's not widely practiced at all. But nonetheless, there is halacha. When you eat a wet food with your hands, if you eat wet food with your hands, you should wash your hands as if you're the same way you wash it for eating bread. So you wash your hands. In this case, because it's not widely practiced and it's not certain, we don't make the bracha, but you wash your hands before eating the vegetable. So the next step technically would be taking the vegetable, the karpas, dipping it in salt water. The reason why we take a vegetable and dip it in salt water is reminiscent. It reminds us of the tears of our bondage. This is again reminding us of the slavery, not of the freedom. Take the vegetable and dip it in salt water. Reminds again of our tears, reminding us of our tears. What's the reason why we eat the vegetable at this point? So you want the kids to ask the question. They say, Daddy, what's going on? What's wrong? What's tonight? Why don't we have our regular meal that we do every Yom Tov?" In order to rouse the children to create to trigger their curiosity, we take this vegetable, we dip it in salt water. And just to point out again, another very important point that's brought in many Haggadahs and our sages point out that every detail of the Seder should, even though it may seem trivial, it may seem unimportant, may not so, it's just a custom and something so small. I don't have children at the table. Why do I need to do it? Our sages explain that every detail of the Seder has tremendous meaning, and even though it's seemingly we can't relate to it. So we do again. Every child. We'll get to it later when we have the four questions. I'll explain soon. So we take the vegetable. At this point, we take the vegetable. We want to dip it in salt water, but in order to take the vegetable and dip it in salt water, we need to wash our hands. So orchatz, kadesh, orchatz. We wash our hands. Just to point out again, this is the only letter, only simon, only one of the 15 steps that has and. In other words, every Kaddish, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, there's no and. There's 15 steps to the Seder. Orchatz is the only one that has and. Make Kiddush, Orchatz, and wash your hands. And the point being is that some people have the custom that they wash normally before Kiddush, and then they hear Kiddush and they eat the bread. So even if normally you wash before Kiddush, in our case, by Orchatz, you make Kiddush first and then you wash your hands in order to have the vegetable dipped in salt water. Then once again, washing their hands, I can demonstrate, but the point is that there's two ways of washing your hands ritually. You could either alternate, once this way, once this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on each hand consecutively. So when you wash your hands, some people only pour twice on each hand. Again, the Chabad custom is to pour 3 times on each hand, and it's 3 times consecutive on each hand, and it's best to get the full wrist. You usually go to the sink and wash your hands. So just to point out, you don't 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's no blessing or passages that are recited. You just wash your hands. You can speak because you're not making the bracha al natilas yadayim. And have the salt water. Just some kosher salt and plain water. At this point, the karpas is removed from the Seder plate. You're supposed to have a small piece of vegetable, not a larger piece, because if you have a larger piece, you have a question of making an after blessing. So you take a very small piece of onion or whatever vegetable you're using, and you dip it in the salt water, and you don't recline, and you just eat a little piece of vegetable. And you do make a blessing, Borei Pri Ha'adama, and that applies to the maror that you're going to eat later on as well. So karpas, at this then, we move along, and you want to recite the Haggadah, but the Haggadah is recited over lechem oini, the poor man's bread. So we take, at this point, we take the middle matzah, and the middle matzah is broken. At the kohen, the Levi, the middle matzah, you break, and a small piece remains in the Seder plate all evening, and the larger piece gets put away for the afikoman. At this point, you hide the afikoman. And some have the custom, the children hide the afikoman, the children steal the afikoman, they ask for whatever they want to get, and so on and so forth, that everyone knows. So now we did yachatz, we broke the middle matzah. The middle matzah is, again, it represents the poor man's bread. The poor man normally doesn't have a complete loaf. He has small portions of bread. As such, this represents, so the matzah in general represents lechem oini, it's flat bread, it's flour and water. Within the matzah actually represents, has both representations. It represents the bread of affliction, the poor man's bread. It also represents the fact that we were liberated. Because when the Jews left Mitzrayim, they left Egypt in such haste that their bread didn't have time to rise. So it's also the bread of affliction, it's also the bread of liberation. The middle matzah is broken in half at this point. We move along to Magid, to recite. If you want to recite the Haggadah, we begin the 4 questions and so on. As I mentioned earlier, the second cup is filled at this point. I'm not going to fill the cup, but at this point, the second cup is filled, and we recite the Haggadah. The Haggadah is the structure of the Haggadah has basically, the Talmud says that you have to, what do we have to say? Which part of the story, what's the minimum that we have to recite if you're not reciting the entire Haggadah? So the Talmud says that Maschilim B'Gnus, we begin with our shame, so to speak, at the difficult times, and we end B'Shvach. We end with praising Hashem, with the status that we had, we were liberated. There's a couple of sections in the Haggadah which begin, we begin with the 4 questions, and following that, you say, Avadim Ayinu, first we were slaves, and then Hashem took us out of Egypt. That's the very first paragraph after the Manishtana, after the 4 questions. Later on in the Haggadah, you have a different opinion of where you have to start Maschil B'Gnus. We speak of our shame, of our beginning before we became a nation, even begins before Abraham was Abraham, and Abraham's ancestors were idol worshippers. So you're supposed to, some opinion in the Talmud begins from Itchila Evdei Avodah Zarah. I was saying that our ancestors were idol worshippers, and Hashem brought us close, and made us into a nation, and so on and so forth, which is the rest of the, which is a kind of a small portion of the Haggadah that has that portion in it. And if you say those sections, technically you fulfill the obligation. So Magid, literally, which is comes from the Higadat Lebincha, you shall respond to your child, or you shall tell, recite, and say the story, is a biblical mitzvah of this evening. So this evening really has two biblical mitzvot, which is eating the matzah. We'll get to that. Eating the matzah and the recitation of at least a certain portion of the Haggadah, reciting the story of our bondage and liberation. That section, that minimum portion, is the biblical mitzvah of the evening. That's specific to tonight. Benching, grace after meals, at least the very first paragraph, is universal. Every time we wash, every time you eat a meal, that's a biblical mitzvah to grace after meals. But specific to tonight, the biblical mitzvahs of I don't know what to say, but specific to Pesach is eating matzah and reciting the Haggadah. Towards the end of Magid, before we during the recitation of the Haggadah, we recited 10 plagues, and at that point, there are different customs of pouring or taking out a portion of the wine. Each plague, there's 16 pours, so to speak. There's 10 plagues, and then there's the three acronyms. And earlier, you say another three: the blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. And at those points, again, this is blood and plagues of retribution, and to acknowledge the fact that we're not celebrating the downfall of the Egyptians. We're celebrating our liberation. We pour a little bit of the wine out. Again, there's different customs. Some people dip their finger in the wine, and either the 10 times or the 16 times. And we actually pour 16 times into a broken vessel, and we pour out that wine completely, and we replenish the wine right after that. Following the 10 plagues, there's one other area which is a very important part to fulfill the obligation of Magid, the recitation, the biblical obligation of reciting the Haggadah. So we have Rabbi Gamliel right before the end of Magid, before we go to the washing our hands for the matzah. Rabbi Gamliel used to say, whoever does not discuss the significance of the following three things on Pesach has not properly fulfilled his duty to recount the Exodus. And that's, again, the Pesach, explaining about the Pesach offering, and the matzah and the maror. Why do we bring the Pesach offering? Again, Pesach, what does the word Pesach come from? It comes from Hashem passing over Jewish homes in Egypt. And matzah is, again, the same. When the Eden left Egypt, when the Jews left Egypt, there was no time for it to rise. And when you say matzah, zu, sha'anu echem al shema, this matzah, what's the reason why we eat the matzah? We actually hold on to the broken piece of matzah and the third matzah. These two pieces, we say matzah zu, this matzah that we're eating, for what purpose are we eating it? Where did it come from? And similar with maror, we say maror zu, this maror, why do we eat it? And we say that paragraph holding on to the maror. Then we conclude Magid. At that point, we say again another very priagafen, and we drink the second glass reclining. This glass is really, really important to recline. Again, according to many authorities, if you don't drink it reclining, you may have to drink another glass of wine. You didn't fulfill the obligation of the 4 cups. Moving along, so at this point we did Kaddish, we made Kiddush, we washed our hands. karpas, we had the vegetable, we broke the middle matzah, and we put it away, the larger piece of the afikoman, and the poor man's bread remains, and we recite the Haggadah over it, and we did, so that's Yachatz, and we did Magid, we already did 5 of the 15 or 14 steps of the evening. And we drank 2 cups. 5 of the 15 steps, we drank 2 cups after Magid, and we used 1 item from the Seder plate at this point. Next is Rachza. At this point, once we recited the Haggadah, as much as we're able to recite, we wash our hands. We wash our hands again, as I demonstrated earlier, 3 times on the right hand, 3 times on the left hand. This time we make Al Natilas Yadayim. So in order to do, really we want to eat the matzah. The next step should have been matzah. But in order to eat matzah, you have 2 steps and preparation to that, which is Rachza. Again, this is a part of the Seder, but it's a preparation to the next step. So you have Rachza, you wash your hands in order to eat bread, you have to wash your hands, matzah, and you have to make hamaitzi. So you have Rachza and hamaitzi. You hold on to all 3 matzahs and you recite hamaitzi lechem na'aretz after you wash your hands. So then you did Rachza and maitzi. And then is matzah. You actually make a special bracha, special blessing, thanking Hashem for giving us this mitzvah of eating matzah. And you have the minimum you have to have, again, this is at least after 8:22 in the evening, and after nightfall, at least a half of a shmura matzah. At least a half of a shmura matzah. Measure in your own matzah, in your own quantity, but that's minimum. And you have to eat reclining, you have to eat the matzah reclining, and you have to eat it within 4 minutes. Otherwise, you didn't eat a certain amount that you're supposed to eat because you're dragging it along a larger amount of time. So you did rachza, maitzi, matzah. At this point, I should point out, I should have mentioned earlier, the matzah in general, it's many authorities put a tremendous emphasis on the importance of making an effort to have round, handmade shmura matzah, at least for the Seder. Round, and then the Torah, they base it even on the fact that the Torah describes how the matzah, the shape of the matzah. The Torah says they baked, when they left Egypt, they baked ugais matzahs, matzah cookies. And obviously, according to all the authorities, the Torah is describing a round matzah, and it should be handmade. It's much more invested in it spiritually and halachically as well. So again, whatever, normally we make it much more available. I have limited now, but in general we make it available, and we encourage very much, at least for the Seders, to have shmura matzah, handmade round shmura matzah. There are all different types. There's thinner ones and there's thicker ones, and there's whole wheat, and there's many different ones we could order in normal circumstance. Also to point out, according to the Kabbalah, according to the Zohar, the matzah is referred to as michladim heimnusa. It's actually, again, just we now know there's many things we are not visible to the eye, but it's there. God, sadly, we know it in a negative way, but in a very positive way. Matzah, eating matzah on Pesach nurtures our faith in Hashem. It's called Michladim Henusa, food of faith. It's also referred to in the Kabbalah as Michlad Asvasa, food of health. And we could use a great dose of faith and health in our world now. So just to point out, in general, when you eat the matzah, to know that it has tremendous spiritual energy as well, besides the biblical mitzvah of eating matzah. So those are the 2 main biblical mitzvahs: eating matzah and the recitation of the Haggadah, recitation of the story. V'higgadah lebincha. Again, the word Haggadah means to recite, to tell the story, and it's based on the verse V'higgadah, the same root. You shall tell, and every child every person is Hashem's child. So even if there's no children at the table, we all ask Hashem for questions. We all ask Hashem for all that we need. When our rabbis, the great sages, when they recited the Haggadah, even when there were no children around, they said on an undertone, they said, Tata, Father, I want to ask you 4 questions. And just like in benching, normally in benching, we say, Arachman, Yivarech Sadinenu, Arachman Yivarchas Avi Meiri, Rachman, the merciful one, referring to Hashem, who he shall bench Avi Meiri, my father, my teacher, Imi Merasi, my mother, my teacher. Even if someone does not have parents present or alive, we still say it in benching. Similarly, we still turn to Hashem and we ask for questions, and we do all the things that children do because we are Hashem's children. Next, moving along, is the Marer. We eat again. You have here at this point. You take the Marer, the top set of Marer, romaine lettuce, romaine hearts, and you have ground horseradish. All this, if you want, not obligatory. We take the Marer, we dip it in the charoses. You don't eat spoons. You don't spoon the charoses. You don't eat tons of it. You don't smear or layer your Marer with charoses. You dip it in a little bit just to commemorate the concept. If you eat tons of it, you have to make a bracha, and it's not part of the Seder at this point during the meal. If you want, enjoy yourself. But at this point, you dip Marer in the chareses, and you're not supposed to take away the bitter taste of horseradish or your lettuce, so you don't scoop charoset at this point. You just dip in a little bit. You make alachilas Marer, or special blessing. It's in the Haggadah. Now, don't recline eating Marer. And at this point, when you finished eating your Marer, the next thing is removed from the Seder plate. The charesis is still there for the next set of Marer. So you have Kerech. The next thing in the order of the evening is the Korech. Korech is a sandwich, and that is because there's a question, a dispute, an uncertainty if Marer should be eaten with a sandwich or not with a sandwich, with a matzah sandwich or not. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when the Holy Temple stood, we had a sandwich. We had the Pesach offering, the lamb, and matzah and Marer eaten together. At this point, we don't have the Pesach offering. We don't have meat in our sandwich at all. So we have the ability to have matzah and Marer. And there's a question whether you should have the matzah and the Marer together or matzah and Marer separately. Everyone is of the opinion you have to have matzah separately first. But the question is how to eat the Marer. To eat the Marer in a sandwich or to eat Marer without a sandwich. To eat Marer plain. So we fulfill both opinions. We have Marer, and then we have Marer in a sandwich. So we take this Marer, we dip it into the charoses, as mentioned earlier, and we take from the third matzah, very bottom matzah, we take a half a matzah, minimum of a half a matzah. We should try at least for a minimum of a half a matzah, and we make the sandwich. And we make the sandwich. We don't make a bracha. There's no special blessing, but there is a passage that reads as follows: "Thus did Hillel do in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. He would combine the Pesach offering, the matzah and Marer, and eat them together." As it says, the verse says, "Al matzahs umererim yichlu," that you should eat the carbon Pesach, you should eat the Paschal offering, the lamb, together with matzah and Marer, and eat it reclining. But this is how it's done. We're not allowed to eat matzah before Pesach, so certainly should not eat matzah on Wednesday before nightfall. At this point, the charesis, the Marer, both Marers and the charesis is all removed from the Seder plate, and we're left with the egg and the zroa, as mentioned earlier. At this point, You can go ahead, make yourself comfortable. You take off your hat and jacket or your suit jacket, and you have and the korech is eaten reclining as well. Matzah is eaten reclining, and the korech, the sandwich, is eaten while reclining as well. Very important. The next is the meal: fish, soup, chicken, whatever. To point out, it's customary. It is not part of the Seder. It's not part of the 15 steps of the Seder, and it's not just accepted custom that you begin the meal with this egg, with the egg that's on your Seder plate. So before you eat your fish and everything else, you take the egg and you dip it in salt water. Again, it's not part of a ritual, not part of any custom. I mean, it's a custom, but not. It's just accepted custom, but not part of the Seder, so to speak, not part of the 15 steps of the Seder. You begin the evening with the egg. So at this point, the egg is removed, and you have your meal. At the end of the meal, you have to remember that we're supposed to eat the afikoman, which is tzafun. So you had 10 steps already now. Rachza, Moitzi, Matzah, Morer, Keirich. That's 10 steps. Shulchan Aruch, which means the festive meal, that's step number 11. Step number 12 is tzafun. You eat afikoman, you find afikoman from whoever hid it from you, and you eat afikoman. There's no blessing or passage, you just eat afikoman. Now it's important, according to many authorities, the afikoman represents the Korban Pesach. It should be eaten while you're satiated. So after the afikoman, it's customary not to eat or drink anything else except the next 2 cups of wine. So the taste of the matzah and the taste of the Korban Pesach should linger in our mouths, in our taste buds. So we eat the afikoman, we do recline while eating the afikoman. That's step number 12. Now again, the Haggadah, the third section of the Haggadah, which I mentioned earlier, we fill at this point. And just also important to mention that the Hallel is recited tonight. Tonight we say in davening and the evening services we say Hallel again. During the Haggadah we say Hallel to praise Hashem for this great miracle, taking us out of Mitzrayim, creating us on who we are. The Hallel itself and the Haggadah itself is also divided in 2 sections. The first half of the Hallel, the first half of the Haggadah represents the previous redemption, liberation from Mitzrayim, and the previous redemptions. And from now going forward, the second half of the Haggadah, Hallel, the second half of the first half of Hallel is in the first half of the Haggadah. The second half of Hallel, which is referred to as Hallel, refers to the future redemption, which we praise Hashem, we ask Hashem that the future redemption should come speedily. So this is the second half of the Haggadah, the second half of the evening represents the future redemption. And as such, we fill a special cup for Elijah the prophet who's going to herald the news and inform us of the coming of Mashiach. So at this point, we fill Eliyahu, the cup for Eliyahu Hanavi. We fill the cup. We fill our third cup. We don't drink it till after we bench, but we fill it at this point, and the benching is recited over the third cup of wine. And at this point, after benching, we drink the third cup of wine, recline, drinking the third cup of wine, and we fill our fourth cup. We don't drink it till after Hallel. Hallel is recited over the fourth cup, but we fill the fourth cup now, and before we proceed to Hallel, we go and we actually open the door for Eliyahu Navi. This demonstrates our trust in Hashem, that we believe and we know that Eliyahu is going to come and herald the arrival of Mashiach. And although Eliyahu could find his way into our home without us opening the door, it is an actual custom to go and open all the doors from where your Seder is to the very front door. And we take candles with you to go and invite Elio with the proper respect he deserves. So you take candles and you go to the door, you open the door, you recite the first phrase that Hashem will pour his wrath over other nations that don't recognize Hashem, and herald in the coming of Mashiach. And then we proceed with Hallel, praising Hashem for all the miracles and creating us into our nation that we are in now, and hoping and praying for the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days, for the future redemption. At the end of Hallel, we drink the fourth cup of wine, again reclining. And once we've done our 14 steps properly, we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim and Nirtza. We hope that L'Shana Haba, meaning that by next year we should already be in Yerushalayim, doesn't mean that next year we should wait another full year till Mashiach comes and we should celebrate Yerushalayim. L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. That next year, by next year, we should have already been in Yerushalayim from immediately. The next year we should be able to do the Seder. This year we should still be able to do the Seder in Yerushalayim. And the other thing I'd like to mention is that some people, most Haggadah say Chasal Seder Pesach. That at this point we concluded the Seder Pesach. It's not an hour Haggadah for us. The reason being is we try to emphasize the fact that we believe the energy and the spirituality that Pesach brings doesn't end. So we don't recite the words Chasal Seder Pesach. And Nirtza means if we do the 14 steps the way we're supposed to, we believe that Nirtza Hashem accepted our plea for the coming of Mashiach, for our redemption. He accepts our plea favorably. May it be speedily in our days. Good Yom Tov.